My name is James, and I am 28 years old. I was a soldier in the U.S. Army. Since childhood, I dreamed of being part of something bigger than myself. I longed for heroism, significance, something that would leave a mark. I grew up in a small town where there weren't many opportunities to stand out. So when I first felt the call, I didn't hesitate. At 18, I joined the Army. It was a fresh start for me. I was ready for the challenge. I enjoyed being in the thick of things, feeling like I was part of something global, something important. I thought I knew what I was signing up for. After several years of service in various war zones around the world, I returned home. But the sense of incompleteness never left me. I was proud of what I had done, proud to have served my country. But inside I knew something had shifted. Everything seemed the same, yet I wasn't the same person who had enlisted. I started to realize that my life, in many ways, had become one big race, its goal not always something meaningful. At some point, I understood that what I was doing wasn't just survival, but a choice I had made unconsciously. On that day in Afghanistan, I could feel it. We were advancing through the desert, and the orders came through. We were to clear a specific area. Nothing seemed out of the ordinary at first. The sky was calm, the sun beating down as we moved through the barren landscape. But something in the air felt different, like a shift was happening just beneath the surface. I didn't know what it was, but I felt uneasy. The world felt like it was holding its breath, waiting for something, and then it happened. Ambush. The moment we stepped into that valley, everything turned to chaos. Explosions, shouts, the rapid gunfire that echoed in every direction. My heart raced, but I didn't panic. I had been through this before. I moved with my squad, trying to keep my head down, but the feeling in my gut was undeniable. We were outnumbered. I knew we weren't going to win this one. Then, out of nowhere, I felt it. A sharp, searing pain in my chest. It wasn't a feeling you could mistake. It was sudden, violent, like an electric shock. And in that moment, time slowed down. The bullet had pierced my vest. It was strange. Not the pain itself, but the realization that this was it. My body went into shock, but my mind was oddly clear. I could hear the frantic voices of my comrades as they tried to pull me out of the line of fire, but everything felt distant. I wasn't fully in my body anymore. I was above it, looking down, detached. The sounds around me grew muffled, like I was listening to them from underwater. I had no power to change what was happening. Then, everything went silent. It wasn't the normal silence of a battlefield. It was an all-encompassing quiet that drowned out every sound, every sensation. I was slipping away, and the coldness of it was almost comforting. I didn't fight it. I felt like I was slowly fading into darkness, like I was becoming part of the air, part of the earth, part of the universe. It was peaceful, oddly peaceful. But with that peace came a crushing sense of finality. I knew that death was taking me. In those last moments, I remember the strange clarity I had. It wasn't a panic. It wasn't terror. It was understanding. My life had been lived in bursts of adrenaline, of purpose, of fight. But now, with the blood leaving my body and my vision fading, I knew this was the end. I felt like I had already let go. I wasn't scared anymore. I didn't regret anything. I simply observed, floating above myself, watching the chaos unfold around me, but feeling an undeniable calm that was far removed from the world I was leaving. And then, at the moment I thought I was completely gone, something changed. There was light. It wasn't the kind of light that hurts your eyes. It wasn't blinding or harsh. It was soft, warm, enveloping. It wasn't like a light you see in the physical world, something you can touch or describe. This was something entirely different. It filled the space around me, surrounding me with warmth, like I was being embraced by something I couldn't understand, but knew instinctively was good. I didn't know how to describe it, but this presence, this light, wasn't just an object or an event. It was alive. It was something more profound than anything I had ever experienced. It was understanding. It was warmth. It was peace. I couldn't grasp its form, but I knew it was there, and it wasn't trying to hurt me or judge me. It was simply present. For the first time in my life, I felt no division between me and the universe. I felt whole. I felt connected. I tried to make sense of what was happening. Was I dead? Was this what it felt like to pass on? I couldn't say for sure, but I was no longer afraid. I was, for the first time, fully aware of the totality of my existence, and in that awareness, I realized that death wasn't the end. It wasn't even the most important part. What mattered was the connection to something larger, something more profound. And as I was surrounded by this light, I felt at peace with the idea of letting go. I didn't know where this journey was taking me, but I was ready. I woke up in a place that was completely foreign to me. It wasn't like anything I had ever experienced. The first thing I noticed was the absence of any pain. For the first time in what felt like ages, there was no tension, no fear, no weight pressing down on me. My body, or what felt like my body, was light, weightless, almost as if I had been freed from the burdens of the physical world. I tried to move, but the concept of movement seemed almost unnecessary here. Everything around me felt vast. There was no up or down, no walls or boundaries. It was just an endless expanse of soft, warm light. Not blinding, but comforting. Everything was bathed in a soothing glow, like I was inside some sort of giant, peaceful aura. I had no idea where I was, but I wasn't scared. I wasn't even confused. It felt right, somehow. As I stood, or rather existed there, I realized I wasn't alone. There was something, or someone else present. At first, I couldn't see them clearly, but I knew they were there. I could feel their presence like a deep, quiet knowing that settled around me like a soft wind. It wasn't intimidating, but rather calming, like the feeling you get when you are near someone who has no need to prove themselves. The atmosphere itself was different from anything I had known on Earth. There were no sounds, no sharp edges to anything, but it wasn't silent either. It was as if everything was in perfect harmony, and the absence of sound was somehow louder than any noise I had ever heard. It felt like the world was listening, waiting for something. I had no idea how much time had passed in this strange place. Seconds, hours, days. It didn't matter. Time felt irrelevant here. But then, just as I was beginning to accept the stillness around me, a figure emerged from the light. It wasn't a person in the traditional sense. I didn't see any distinct features, no face, no form, but I felt its presence, and I knew it was looking at me, at my very soul. The figure radiated warmth, like the sun at its most gentle, but there was something infinitely more profound than any earthly warmth I had known. It wasn't just the light. It was the love within it, the unconditional kind. I felt it reach deep inside of me, touching parts of my heart I hadn't known existed. The feeling was overwhelming, but in the best way possible. This presence made me feel safe, protected, even cherished. I wanted to reach out, but I couldn't move. It was as though I didn't need to. And then, a voice came to me, not through my ears, but directly into my mind. It was calm, gentle, yet full of power. I could feel the voice wrapping around me like a warm blanket, soothing away every doubt, every worry, every fragment of fear that had clung to me. The voice did not speak in words as we know them. It was more like a feeling that translated into meaning, a kind of universal language that transcended anything I had ever encountered. "You have come here for a reason, James," the voice said. It was a simple statement, but it carried weight far beyond what I could comprehend at that moment. "You have experienced death, but it is not the end. You are not here by accident. You have much to learn." As the words sank into my consciousness, I felt an incredible sense of calm, but also something more, an understanding. This wasn't just an afterlife, and I wasn't just drifting in some ethereal waiting room. I was meant to be here. The figure or presence wasn't just a guide. It was a part of me, a reflection of something I had always been searching for. But I hadn't been able to see it in my earthly life. I had been so caught up in the struggle for survival, in the rush of combat, in the unrelenting pace of life, that I had missed the most important thing of all, the connection to myself, to others, to the world, the love that binds everything together. I had thought I understood the meaning of life, but this moment made me realize how little I truly knew, how much I had missed. The figure began to move, slowly, and I instinctively followed its every movement, although I was still rooted to the spot, unable to physically move myself. It didn't speak again, but the feeling it emitted told me everything I needed to know. I wasn't just here to witness the truth. I was here to absorb it, to feel it, to integrate it into every fiber of my being. I understood now that the reason I had been allowed to leave the physical world was because I was given a gift, an opportunity to change. Not for me alone, but for everyone else I would encounter. The figure, still radiating its calm and love, seemed to reach out as if to say, "The world you knew is not all there is. You have more to give, more to experience." As these words settled into me, my heart seemed to swell. I felt immense gratitude, but also a deep sadness. Not for myself, but for the world I had come from. I understood now that the suffering I had seen, the wars, the pain, the misunderstandings between people, it all stemmed from one fundamental lack: the lack of connection, the lack of love. People were so caught up in their own lives, their own battles, that they couldn't see the bigger picture. They didn't realize that the only thing that truly mattered was love and compassion. The rest, the fear, the anger, the resentment, was just an illusion, a byproduct of their disconnection from the truth of who they were. The figure continued to emanate warmth, and I felt that warmth growing inside me too. I realized that this light wasn't something external. It was something that existed within me, within all of us. It was the part of us that was always connected to the divine, to the greater whole. I began to understand that the purpose of my journey, the reason I had been given this second chance, was not just for me to live differently, but to help others see what I was seeing now, to show them that it wasn't about fighting for survival or about chasing fleeting desires. It was about remembering who we truly were. It was about love, and that's what I was being called to share. The presence seemed to smile, if it was possible for something so vast and incomprehensible to smile. It wasn't a grin, but rather a gentle, reassuring acknowledgement. The light grew even more intense, but it didn't hurt. Instead, it felt like the most pure and perfect embrace. I felt as if I was being filled to the brim with all the understanding I had been searching for, and as it poured into me, I also felt a deep sense of responsibility. I wasn't just meant to keep this wisdom to myself. It was for everyone. The voice, still echoing in my mind, said, "You will go back. You have much to do. You will help them understand." The light around me began to shift, and I felt myself being pulled toward it. It wasn't forceful or frightening. It was like being gently guided into a new reality, one where everything made sense. As I was pulled closer, I realized that I had already been changed. I couldn't go back to the life I had known. The world had opened up to me in a way that I couldn't have imagined before. And now, I had a mission: to carry this light, this truth, back with me, to share it with others, to help them see the way. And as the light pulled me toward it, I felt at peace, because I knew that no matter what happened next, I was no longer lost. I had found my path. In the stillness, I felt my awareness shift. It was as if I was no longer just a human being, stuck in the confines of time and space, but a part of something much larger. This presence around me, the figure, the light, wasn't just an observer. It was the very essence of understanding, of wisdom, of the universal truth that had always existed but was hidden from human perception. The sense of connection was overwhelming, and I could feel the deep love radiating from it. It wasn't a love that belonged to any one person. It was a love for everything, every being, every life, every atom. It made me realize that the greatest thing any of us could ever experience is the deep understanding of this interconnectedness. Everything in existence is tied together by an invisible thread, and that thread is love. At that moment, I understood the core truth of the universe. Love is the foundation of everything. As the realization settled into my heart, I felt a deep pull within me, as though the very fabric of my being was being reformed. It wasn't just an intellectual understanding. It was a visceral, physical sensation. My heart, my soul, my very existence began to vibrate with the truth I was receiving. It was as if every moment of my life had led me here, to this exact point, so that I could understand this one simple yet profound truth. I was not alone in the world, never had been, and never would be. The relationships I had, the people I had met, the experiences I had lived, they were all part of the same dance of existence. Everything, every action, every thought, every word was woven into this larger pattern, and this pattern was built on love. I saw how love transcended boundaries, borders, races, ideologies, and even time itself. It was the ultimate force, the ultimate bond. The figure, still radiating that soft, encompassing light, seemed to acknowledge this understanding in me. It didn't need to speak. Its presence alone confirmed the truth of what I was feeling. The connection between us was undeniable, yet it didn't feel like a relationship between two individuals. It felt like the union of the universe with itself, as if every being was a reflection of the same light, the same energy. And with that union came the recognition of our shared responsibility. It was not enough to just feel this love, to understand it. We were meant to share it, to live it. The world, I understood now, had been created with a single purpose: to learn to love, not just in small, fleeting moments, but in a deep, unconditional, all-encompassing way. This was the ultimate purpose of human life. Every experience, was a lesson in learning to love. Suddenly, I was shown images, not through my eyes, but through my mind's eye, images of the world, of people, of human history. I saw love in its purest form, but also its corruption, its perversion. I saw how easily love could be distorted, twisted by fear, by hatred, by misunderstandings. Wars, conflicts, isolation, all of these were born not from love, but from its absence. I saw individuals, nations, and cultures torn apart, not by the force of evil, but by the lack of understanding, the lack of connection. The world had forgotten the most simple truth, that love is the key to everything. I saw how people had turned away from love, how they had sought power, control, and dominance over each other. But all of this was temporary. Love was eternal. It was the only true force that could heal the wounds of humanity. The figure's light grew even brighter as it revealed the full extent of the message. Love was not just a passive feeling. It wasn't something you simply wait for or hope to find. Love is an active choice. It is something you do, not something you feel passively. And this choice was available to everyone, every single human being on this planet, no matter their past, their mistakes, or their fears. The presence conveyed to me that it wasn't the mistakes that defined us. It was the ability to love and forgive, to choose compassion, kindness, and empathy over anger, resentment, and division. This is what I was being called to understand, and more importantly, to share. Love was not a lofty ideal. It was a practice, a discipline. It was something you lived, breathed, and acted upon every single day. I was shown how, in the world I had come from, there were countless opportunities for people to practice love. But so often, these opportunities were ignored, overlooked, or even dismissed. People were too busy, too caught up in their struggles, too consumed by their own fears and insecurities to truly see each other. I was shown families, friends, communities, all caught in cycles of misunderstanding, conflict, and isolation. I saw how easy it was for the smallest miscommunication to spark a rift, how grudges festered and grew into walls between people. But I also saw the immense power in healing those wounds, in choosing to bridge those gaps with compassion. I saw how a single act of love, a single moment of understanding, could transform an entire life, an entire community. Love, when chosen, was a force more powerful than any division, more enduring than any hate. The figure's presence seemed to surround me, enveloping me in light, as it conveyed the final part of the message. It was time for me to return, to go back to the world I had come from. But I wasn't returning empty-handed. I was returning with a gift, a responsibility, and a mission. I now understood that my life had not just been a series of random events. It had been a journey of preparation, of learning, of slowly awakening to this truth. But it wasn't just for me. It was for others too. The message wasn't something I could keep to myself. I had to share it, to live it. It was now my responsibility to help others remember the truth of who they were, that they too were capable of love, of healing, and of connection. It was time to go back, but not as the same person who had left. I was different now. I was whole. As I began to drift away from the figure, from the light, I felt an overwhelming sense of peace. It wasn't a peace of resignation or of retreat, but a peace that came from deep knowing. I knew my purpose now. I knew that my life was not about achievements, accolades, or success. It was about love, about living with love and sharing love. And even though I would be returning to a world that often seemed dark and divided, I knew that if I carried this message with me, if I lived this truth, I could help make a difference. I was not alone. We were all connected, all part of this grand tapestry, and it was through love that we would heal and grow. I felt ready to return, but I also knew that this was just the beginning. The figure's light gently faded as I was slowly pulled back toward my body. It wasn't painful or forceful. It was more like a transition, a soft but undeniable pull. I felt myself being drawn back to the physical world, back to the life I had once known. But this time, I knew that everything had changed. I wasn't returning as the same person who had left. I had been transformed. I understood now that I had a mission, a purpose, and it was to live out the love I had been shown, to embody it in every action, every interaction. I felt the warmth of the light still within me, and I knew that I would carry it forever. The figure, though now fading, seemed to smile one last time, and I felt a deep, abiding peace wash over me. As I opened my eyes again, I was back in the world, back in my body, but everything had changed. The world seemed both the same and different. The familiar sights, the sounds, the people, it was all there. But now I saw it with new eyes. I could see the potential for love in every situation, in every person. I understood that it was never too late to change, to choose love over fear, and that was the message I carried with me. Love is not just a feeling, it is a force, a practice, and a choice. It was up to me, and to all of us, to choose love and to make the world a better place. One act of kindness, one moment of connection at a time. When I opened my eyes again, I was back in my body. The first sensation was an overwhelming heaviness, as if I had been pulled back through a thick fog into a world that suddenly seemed much smaller and more confined. The bright light that had surrounded me now faded into the dull reality of the hospital room. I could hear the steady beep of the heart monitor, feel the sharp smell of antiseptic in the air, and the coolness of the sheets beneath me. But there was something profoundly different. It was like a veil had been lifted, and I could see things with a clarity I hadn't known before. The physical world, with all its noise and distractions, suddenly seemed insignificant compared to the vast, unexplainable truth I had just experienced. I wasn't sure how long I had been gone, but in that moment, I felt more alive than I ever had before. I felt the weight of my body, but I also felt a deep lightness inside me, as if I had been touched by something divine. I blinked as my surroundings came into focus. The room was sterile, filled with the white light of overhead lamps, and there was the faint hum of the air conditioning. Nurses and doctors bustled around, their voices low but urgent. I tried to sit up, but my body felt weak, almost foreign to me. It was as though I had been asleep for a long time, and now I was waking up to a world that no longer seemed real. The sound of footsteps echoed in the hallway, and the rhythmic beeping of the machines around me seemed distant, like background noise. It was hard to reconcile this place, this moment, with the vast expanse of love and light I had just come from. I was no longer sure if what I had experienced was a dream or reality. But the truth settled in with a calm certainty. I had changed. Something deep inside me had been irrevocably altered, and now I had a purpose that I couldn't ignore. The first person to enter my room was my mother. She rushed to my side, her face a mixture of relief and confusion, as though she had been holding her breath, waiting for me to come back. She gently stroked my hair, her eyes brimming with unshed tears, and for a moment, everything in the world seemed to stop. I could see her, but I wasn't just seeing her. I could feel her, the depth of her love, her worries, her hopes, all of it flooding into me like a wave. It was as if I could read her soul, and I realized how much I had missed, how much I had taken for granted in my life before. I had always loved her, but now I saw the true depth of that love. I wanted to tell her everything, the things I had learned, the messages I had received, but the words wouldn't come. I wasn't sure how to explain what had happened, or if I could even make her understand. As the days passed and I regained my strength, I began to notice more details about the world around me. The walls of the hospital room felt suffocating, and the sounds of the machines that kept me alive now felt like a constant reminder of how fragile life truly was. I saw people walking down the hallways, some hurried, some lost in their own thoughts, and I realized how disconnected we all were. Everyone was so wrapped up in their own lives, in their own worries, that they didn't see each other. There was a quiet loneliness in the air, a disconnection that seemed to run deep in this place and in the world beyond it. I had never noticed it before, but now it was impossible to ignore. The love that had enveloped me in that otherworldly space was nowhere to be found here. Instead, there was a coldness, a fear of facing one another, of truly connecting. I wanted to scream, to tell everyone what I had learned, to make them see what I now saw. But I was afraid of their reaction. How could I explain that the world we lived in was full of noise and distraction, that people had forgotten the most essential truth of life? Love? How could I convey that everything we were chasing, the power, the success, the material wealth, was hollow if it didn't stem from love? I tried to talk to the doctors, to my friends, but my words felt empty. I could see their eyes glaze over, their minds drifting to the next task, the next patient, the next problem. They couldn't hear me. No one could. It was as if the world was so caught up in the pursuit of meaningless goals that it couldn't hear the message I had brought back. It was heartbreaking, knowing that I was holding something so precious, and yet it seemed impossible to share it. Over time, I began to make small changes. I started to focus more on the little things, the moments of connection with the people around me, the simple acts of kindness that often went unnoticed. I made an effort to truly see people, to look into their eyes and acknowledge them. I took the time to listen, really listen, to the stories of those I interacted with. It wasn't much, but it was something. And in those moments, I could feel the love that had once enveloped me begin to spread again, bit by bit. It was as though the energy I had brought back was slowly leaking into the world, finding cracks and crevices where it could take root. It wasn't always easy. There were moments when I doubted myself, when I wondered if I was really making a difference. But the truth I had learned still lived in me, and that truth kept me going. One afternoon, I was walking through the park when I saw a young boy sitting on a bench, alone. He looked sad, his eyes fixed on the ground, as if the weight of the world was too much for him to bear. Without thinking, I sat beside him. I didn't say anything at first. I just sat there, letting him feel that someone was with him. And after a few minutes, he looked up. Our eyes met, and for the briefest moment, there was a connection, something unspoken but powerful. It was like a flash of recognition, as if he knew I understood. He smiled softly, and for the first time in what seemed like forever, I saw him relax. I didn't have to say anything profound. Just being there, showing him that I cared, was enough. And in that moment, I knew I was on the right path. Love wasn't about grand gestures or speeches. It was about showing up, being present, and making a difference in someone's life, even in the smallest of ways. Slowly, the changes in me began to ripple out. I started talking to my friends about what I had learned, not in an effort to convince them, but just to share what was now a part of me. I spoke of love, not as an abstract concept, but as a force that had the power to heal, to transform, to unite. I began to see shifts in the people around me. Small, subtle changes. Someone pausing to help a stranger. A smile exchanged between two people who had been distant for years. A moment of understanding between a parent and child. These were the kinds of changes I had been hoping for, and they were happening, slowly but surely. The world wasn't going to change overnight, but I could see that the seeds of love were being planted, one small interaction at a time. I realized then that the transformation I had undergone wasn't just for me, it was for everyone. The love I had experienced, the truth I had learned, wasn't meant to be kept to myself. It was meant to be shared. I didn't need to change the world in one fell swoop. I just needed to live my life with intention, with love, and the rest would follow. It wasn't about being perfect or getting everything right. It was about being authentic, about showing up for others and letting love guide my actions. I understood now that every moment mattered, every connection was an opportunity, and that the power of love was always available. It just needed to be nurtured, to be given freely. My purpose was clear. I didn't need to search for it anymore. It was right in front of me, in every person I encountered, in every moment I lived. My mission was simple: to embody love, to be a conduit for it in this world, to remind others of its power and its importance. And as I moved through the world, I began to see it everywhere, in the smallest acts of kindness, in the smiles of strangers, in the quiet moments of connection that often go unnoticed. Love was always there, waiting to be noticed, waiting to be shared. I had found my path, and now I knew it was my responsibility to walk it, with love as my guide. Over the weeks that followed, I felt as though I was living in two realities at once. There was the physical world, my body, the hospital room, the familiar people around me. But then there was another reality, one that lingered just beneath the surface. It was the world of awareness, of understanding. The truth that had been imparted to me was like a seed planted deep inside my soul, and as time passed, it began to grow. I could feel it expanding, pushing through every fiber of my being, taking root in every thought, in every word. It wasn't just an intellectual knowledge, it was an experience, a feeling that radiated from within me. Every breath I took, every step I made, felt like a conscious choice to live in accordance with this new understanding. The world around me still seemed full of distractions, noise, and chaos, but now I saw it through a new lens. The more I reflected on the truth I had learned, the more I realized how much it had shaped the way I saw the people around me. I had always known love existed, but now I understood it in a way I had never fully grasped before. Love wasn't just an emotion or a fleeting feeling. It was a force, a guiding light that could transform everything it touched. I began to see it in the smallest gestures, someone holding the door open for another, a kind word shared between strangers, the quiet moments of care given to a loved one. These weren't just random acts of kindness. They were expressions of something much deeper. They were proof of the love that existed at the heart of the world, and that love was always there, just waiting to be recognized. It wasn't something to chase or strive for. It was already within us, ready to be awakened. But even as I felt this growing sense of love within me, I realized something else. The world wasn't ready to embrace it. People were so caught up in their own struggles, their own pain, that they couldn't see the love that was all around them. I saw friends and family, colleagues and strangers, all trapped in cycles of fear, anger, and misunderstanding. They were so wrapped up in their own worlds that they couldn't connect to each other, couldn't see past their differences, couldn't reach out in compassion. It broke my heart. I wanted to shake them, to make them understand the simple truth that had been shown to me, that love was the answer to everything. But I couldn't force it. I realized that love wasn't something that could be given as a command or a lesson. It had to be felt, experienced, and chosen. I couldn't change them, but I could change myself. I could be the example of the love I wanted to see in the world. It had to start with me. I began to approach every day with intention, with love as my guide. I made an effort to be present, to truly listen when someone spoke, to offer compassion in moments of tension, and to practice patience when things didn't go my way. It wasn't always easy. There were moments when I felt frustrated, when I slipped back into old habits of impatience or judgment. But I also felt a growing strength inside me, a kind of quiet power that came from the knowledge that I was living in alignment with something greater than myself. Every time I made the choice to act with love, no matter how small the action, I felt a sense of peace, a deep satisfaction that I was on the right path. And slowly, over time, I began to notice changes in the people around me. They might not have recognized the shift immediately, but I could see it in their eyes, in the way they interacted with me and with others. There was a softness to their expressions, a willingness to connect, to understand, and to care. One afternoon in a coffee shop, I was reading when a woman entered, looking upset and trembling. I stood up and asked if she was okay, and she broke down in tears, sharing her struggles at work and feelings of isolation. I didn't have answers, just listened and held space for her. I saw her pain and strength and let her know she wasn't alone. After a few minutes, she thanked me and walked away lighter, and I knew I had been part of her healing, even if just for a moment. As time went on, I found myself surrounded by more and more moments like that. Small, everyday opportunities to practice love. It wasn't always about the big, grand gestures. It was the little things. The smile shared with a stranger, the kind word to a colleague, the willingness to listen without judgment. These moments, while seemingly insignificant in the grand scheme of things, began to add up. They began to create ripples in the world around me, ripples that, I hoped, would eventually reach others. I knew that love wasn't something that could be forced, but I also knew that if I kept living this way, if I kept choosing love over fear, over judgment, over indifference, then slowly the world would change. I couldn't control what others did, but I could control my actions, and that in itself was powerful. I began to see the world through a different lens. Every interaction became an opportunity, every moment an invitation to choose love. I didn't always succeed, and there were times when I fell short, but I was more aware of the choices I was making. I began to notice the little things that I had once overlooked, the way someone's eyes lit up when they were truly listened to, the subtle smile someone gave when they felt seen, the warmth in a hand placed on another's shoulder. These things mattered. They were the threads that wove us all together, and they were the foundation of the world I wanted to build. I wasn't trying to change everything at once. I wasn't looking for a grand transformation. I just wanted to be part of the small, steady shift that was already happening around me, to contribute to the quiet revolution of love that I had come to believe in. And yet, despite all the progress I had made, I still found myself wrestling with doubt. There were days when the world felt too heavy, when the forces of division and hatred seemed insurmountable. On those days, it was hard to remember that love could truly overcome everything. But every time I felt that doubt creeping in, I returned to the truth I had learned. Love was not weak. It was not passive. It was the strongest force in the universe. And even when it seemed like it wasn't working, even when it seemed like the world was lost in darkness, I knew that love was still there, waiting to be recognized, waiting to be shared. It wasn't always visible, but it was always present. And so I held on to that truth, even in the moments when it felt like the world was falling apart. As I moved forward, I realized that love wasn't a destination. It was a journey. Every day was an opportunity to walk that path, to live it, to embody it. It wasn't about reaching some final goal or achieving perfection. It was about choosing love in every moment, even in the most challenging of circumstances. I wasn't trying to be perfect. I was simply trying to be present, to be authentic, to let love guide me through each interaction. And as I did, I saw how the world responded. It wasn't immediate. It wasn't obvious. But the more I lived with love as my compass, the more I saw the ripple effect. It was as if the energy I was putting out into the world was slowly shifting the atmosphere around me. People were responding, connecting, opening up. Slowly but surely, love was making its way into places that had once seemed cold and indifferent. One day, I found myself sitting in a quiet park, watching the sunset. And for the first time since I had returned, I felt complete peace. I had no grand plans for the future, no overwhelming sense of urgency. I wasn't chasing anything anymore. I was simply being, and in that being, I felt the love I had been searching for all along. I realized that love wasn't something to be found or achieved. It was something to be lived. It was already here, within us, all around us. We just had to choose it. And in that moment, as the sun dipped below the horizon, I knew I was on the right path. Not because I had all the answers, but because I was finally living in alignment with the most important truth there was. Love was the answer to everything, and I was ready to live that truth every single day.